Well, good morning, everybody. Deacon Tim Wyman here. And once again, we're back with another edition of the Parish Coffee Hour with Father Paul and friends. And so we just want to get started right into it and hear from Father Paul if he has any parish updates for us. And then we're going to move right into our show for the day. So take it away, Father Paul.
Good morning, everybody. It's good to be with you again. And from a parish update, we're still in an uncertain stage as we're looking at what the next couple of weeks will be like for school, whether it'll be virtual or in person. And we're looking forward to a decision being made as the next couple of days move on. And again, it's drawing from the wisdom of the CDC and the governments, but also drawing from the guidance of our bishop and his advisory staff. From a personal standpoint, it's been a good day so far. I had Mass this morning for the feast of the great missionary, St. Francis Xavier. And then following that, like so many of you, I've started putting out some of the creches around the rectory. So baby Jesus isn't there yet, so we've got him in some different spots. And the Magi haven't arrived, but everybody else is sort of there, and they're waiting. And I think we've all got our own individual and at least borderline charming approaches to how we do these things. Well, it's great today. We've got Deacon Jim and Dot Bennett with us, and our focus is on the beautiful and recently built and recently consecrated Juan Diego Ministry Center. So we're so glad you're with us today, Jim and Dot. And as the program goes on, we want to learn about the center and also the ministry that it's going to be linked up with. So I think to start it all off, if you could just introduce yourselves, and then I think it's workable to do a virtual tour of the center. If you can guide us through that, that'd be great. Again, thanks for being with us today.
Okay. Well, thanks to you, Father Paul, and for inviting us to be with you this morning, and thanks for Tim's efforts to get all this stuff set up technology-wise. We're going to start maybe 10 to 15 minutes here at the most, maybe a bit briefer, taking a look at the physicality of the building, what it looks like on the outside and inside, and then we can get into the discussion about the various ministries that we're either offering now or we plan to offer in the future, whether COVID lasts 2 more months or longer than that. But what you see right now is the exterior of the building, and the whole design of the building was to try to make a connection with the community. There's 10,000 Hispanics who live around this area who can walk here in less than 20 minutes, but we wanted it to basically look like home. And so it looks like in the US, you would see buildings that look like this in Southern California, New Mexico, Arizona, some places in Texas. But this is what missions look like from the 18th century in Mexico, all Central America, and down into South America. So
it's on Alexandria Drive, just off of First Sales Road, right?
Right. If you were coming out from downtown, 1.1 miles before you hit New Circle Road, as though you're going to the airport, it's the intersection of First Sales and Alexandria. If you're coming from downtown out, when you're at the traffic light, you can see the building. The cupola, the bell tower there is close to 50 feet tall. It's pretty easy to see. And we picked this location just because Deacon classmate friend of Tim and ours is a retired demographer, Bob Joyce. He gave me all the data, and this was manna from heaven. We couldn't have picked a better location. So a lot of foot traffic up there. People walk by, ask you questions, and you can almost see the look on their face. Like, I just got a text message from my brain that says, parece como mi pueblecito. This looks like the little town that I lived in, the mission church that we have there. I want to give Doug Culp credit for, he suggested above the archway on the door that we put the name of the building there, versus some contemporary sign. And I'll talk more about some of the wood and materials and what we were trying to do with that a little bit later. You want to go to the next one, Tim? That shows you just from a different angle, the door close up. Most of all the wood that we use pretty much on the building exterior and interior is from local horse farms. When we get to the chapel, you'll see most of that came from Calumet. And then I'll explain later why we have a little plaza out front. Yeah, there's a close up of the door. The wood that's on that door, based on which piece it is, it's somewhere between 100 and 200 years old. Most of the stuff in the chapel is from the early 1800s. But that's what a mission door would look like if you were someplace in Mexico or Central or South America. Next. Then as you enter into this, in terms of the design, interior and exterior of the building, I can't say enough about the job that Dot did in terms of how it looks. We did not want this to look institutional. We did not want it to look like a hospital, contemporary office building, anything like that. So she's gone to great means and decisions making in terms of, you see the tile it's from Mexico, surrounds the door, and that door there replicates the front entrance, with the chandelier. This is where you would come into the building. There's a little security office to the right and an elevator to the left. Next. Now we're in the chapel area. The whole, you'll see in a couple slides, the whole idea with the chapel was we wanted to create a feeling that when you walk through, the doors are 16 feet, they're pocket doors. When you step through those doors, you're going back in time about 300 years. You're going back to, the 1700s. And so that's everything that you see in there. Benches I imported from Mexico. They look too contemporary, so we got an oxygen acetylene torched and scorched them, to make them look worn. When you look at the altar, the tabernacle stand, the ambo to the left, and the credence table to the right, they all came from the same barn. They're made to look primitive. They didn't have saws in those days, hand hewn, and that wood is 200 years old. If you look at the ceiling, those beams and the cross that Jesus is on came from Fleming County. They're 200 years old from the early 1800s. Jesus, we had, thanks be to God and Patrick from Benedictus, Jesus was handmade in Spain, not something you just walk in a store and buy, and had them shipped over. If you look to the left and right, there's two stained glass windows that were designed by another classmate of Tim and ours, Zig Ziglar, and his business was taken over by a terrific lady named Sam. This was her first project. She went solo. Each of those windows, you'll see a little horizontal bar. It's a French technique. The glass is almost an inch thick. Those windows weigh 500 pounds. So you've got to split them in two so they don't collapse. But the strategy here is you've got Juan Diego on his knees opening up his stilma to show the bishop evidence of Guadalupe, and looking through across Jesus on the cross, looking towards Nuestra Senora de Guadalupe on the right. And I can tell you, when you're over there in the evening, in particular in the summer, where the sun's going down the west, the colors are just, they're breathtaking. So we've got nothing but super positive feedback on the chapel itself. Might go through the next couple there. There's just a different angle. You can see where the benches have that worn, burn look. Cindy Olson and Dot did all the lighting and sconces. Next. Again, just the chairs you see in the corner for the presider and the servers are also from the artisan part of Mexico. And then that's what the opening looks like coming up from the big room, going in. The pocket doors are hidden. And this is what it would look like if Father Paul were there having a mass from a presider's perspective. And again, all that wood came from Calumet. Next.
How many does it hold, Jim?
Normal times would hold 40,
Yeah.
40 plus servers.
Mhm.
Now this is the large room that outside of the chapel. We're going to use this for things like showing movies, community meetings. Look, if you had a large Bible study group, when I say movies, you know, non-violent, non-sexual flicks, so to speak. We're really not going to rent it out, but we are going to use it for with the cleaning charge for social celebrations following a sacrament conferred in a parish. So we want people, we're communicating, you know, one person at a time through the neighborhood. It's not a church, it's not a parish, it never will be, but it's an apostolate of the diocese, but it's made to look like a Spanish mission. And if you have your child baptized, confirmed, First Communion, or a marriage, let's say at Mary Queen or St. Paul's, then you could come here and have your social celebration afterwards. The only exception to that, it's not a sacrament, but the quinceañera is very important in this culture. So we would have a quinceañera, could have a quinceañera mass and a celebration here. It'll hold 160 people plus 40 in the chapel. Now we're up on the second floor, which is where the social services come in. This is the reception or waiting area. In the medical area, that's where you'd have an admin or a group of doctors bring an admin office person with them, hardwired so they can go back to their database in their office and people can fill out forms and paperwork right there. Adjacent to that, this is now where you would have the consult with the physician. We have some desks that look sort of strange. We had some made, but we wanted a desk with no drawers so we don't have violation of privacy issues because people are leaving paperwork and files and that sort of stuff there. But this is where Dot did such an amazing job trying to make it feel homey. You know, earth tones, you know, bright colors. I mean, that particular rug, you know, and desk came out of our house, but that's the medical area. Next. We've got two adjacent examination rooms out in that reception area. That's you know, examination table. We won't really fix people here, but it's more medical screening and monitoring, and then deciding what kind of ultimate, you know, attention they need, you know, in the end. This is the office for counseling. We'll have a suite of services here for you know, bipolar, depression, addiction, you know, family dynamics, marriage problems, etc. And the psychologist we talked to said, you know, paint the walls blue. Blue will reduce the blood pressure, reduce the stress, make people sort of, you know, chill out to some extent. And you'll see the legs of these tables now. Some of them are Aztec for Mexico, some are Mayan for Central America. And then we didn't like the Incan design, so we went with American Navajo for the third. Next. Actually, the last office was legal. This is a psychology office here. And the things you see on the walls are different art objects we've purchased from Mexico and other places, you know, in our travels over the years. Next. This is, you really can't see what's really behind this. This is the largest room upstairs, a little bit over 500 square feet. It's set up now for COVID spacing, but behind the walls are lots of blocks of wood. So all these rooms that are classroom and nature will be multifunctional. So we will be screwing physical therapy equipment to these blocks of woods that you can't see. You can't anchor them into just a 2x4, let's say something with a pulley system. But we'll do in these educational rooms, English as a second language classes, physical therapy, parenting skills, nutrition for your family, emergency preparedness, fair family housing, cultural orientation, etc. So lots of different functions in the same room, you know, during the same day. Next. It's just a hallway going down the middle of the second floor. And again, we try to use the art objects and things to soften it up and make it not look like you were in an office building. I want to give the bishop credit for this. I was standing in this room with him and said you could have mothers in here in the daytime having an English as a second language class, and the children could be next door, you know, basically babysitting. And the bishop said, well, what about separation anxiety? What if you have a kid crying? Why don't you put a window in here? So we thought that was a terrific idea. And if the kid's crying and doesn't want to see mommy, then we'll just pull the curtain shut. These rooms are a little bit smaller, but still around 400 square feet.
Wow.
Now here's manna from heaven. So I guess officially as of the end of September, 1 October, the three sisters from Mexico, with the blessing of the bishop and Mother Superior who came up to visit, have assigned the nuns to work, through the center 4 to 6 hours a day. And I can't tell you what that means to the center in this project. So we're doing special ESL classes for them right now because 25% of the people live in this area are not Hispanic. So that they've got to, ramp up their English skills some. So we've doubled the hours. So they're taking classes pretty much, 2 hours a day. This was taken at the ribbon cutting event. This is Ignacio on the left, Guadalupe in the middle, and Sister Felipe on the right. Next. Commercial kitchen in the back, most expensive room in the building because of all the regulatory requirements. But, if the family wants to prepare a meal for a quinceañera celebration that they're having there with certain kinds of controls, you've got to have, Dot's got a license for food handling, this sort of stuff. But you could prepare your tacos and tortillas and tamales right there. Positive feedback we got from this was Brian McCarty, who's the owner of Malone, said that some of the equipment we had was better than what he's got in his restaurants. Next. We're calling this nice little group here. You see Doug and Yvette Culp in the back, Dot and I on the right, and the three sisters, Eduardo Fortini and his wife Luz on the right, and then hopefully a soon-to-be seminarian, Alejandro Cifuentes to the left. But they're going to be helping me. We're all going to be, we started yesterday. The sisters and I went and knocked on the doors of 48 apartments. So we're going through the neighborhood the old-fashioned way, knocking on the door. We're here to help. Here's what we're doing. If you're interested in praying the rosary, adoration, ESL, fill this card out, drop it off at the center, et cetera, et cetera. So we wanted people to have a picture of us before we show up. So if somebody's looking through the people, they're wondering who these people are out there. So we operationalized that yesterday. Okay. So that's pretty much an overview. Social services, educational, medical, legal kinds of things, physical therapy on the second floor, and the first floor, a chapel for prayer. There will be mass with the frequency that the bishop will determine. If we're successful at making this place happen as we envision it, I think we'll see the roles, in particular at Mary Queen and St. Paul and others, will increase as people come back to Christ.
Wow. Well, how did the idea of the Hispanic Center develop?
Well, it really started about 22 years ago, before the diocese had anything in particular. Dot and a former nun, Elaine Caldwell, and I went to Father Pat Stewart and said we'd like to start, something at St. Mark once a month. At that time, the only priest who spoke Spanish fairly fluently was Father Jay. So that's where it started. And then the subsequent 10 to 15 years, Dot and I end up working with 13 other parishes, from Somerset and London to Moorhead when you were over there, Father Paul, to Nicholasville, et cetera, et cetera. And we kept seeing the same gap, whether you were in Somerset or Harrodsburg or Paris, the same gaps existed in terms of immigration help and not getting medical attention counseling problems for teenagers, addictions, etc. So that's really where we formulated the idea that maybe the most effective and maybe the most cost efficient way to do this was to build a center in Lexington, because most of the population is in Fayette County, but also, we've got these bedroom communities, these 12 to 15 places around Lexington, where there's significant Hispanic population there. And whether you're in Paris or Richmond or Frankfurt, most of those communities can drive to the center about as fast as you can drive from one end of Lexington to the other. So it's put there, and that's really, and the idea from the look, really, I want to give Bishop John credit for that. We told him we didn't know what we were doing, and we had no ego in this thing. And he said, well, why don't you go down to El Paso, where I was for 15 years, and meet this terrific Monsignor, Arturo Banuelas, who's done this about 6 times. So one of the major takeaways from him was, it's got to look like home. Don't build some gringo steel glass looking building. Number 2, put a little plaza out front, and put some benches out there in the spring, get some flowers and pots out there. I say this tongue in cheek. He said, don't worry, when they come up and then they want to stop and have a smoke, don't worry about what they're smoking. Just get into conversation with them, invite them inside to see a movie. And once you do some things for them, then you can talk about Jesus. But don't come on like gangbusters, very, very quickly. And that's why it looks, the way it looks. So kudos to Bishop John for sending us. We went down twice, and he's one of these people that, you don't want to leave him. With inspirational, you just feel like you're connected to the biggest battery in the world, and he's just got all this energy going through his veins. We want to invite him up for the grand opening in the spring. He also used to work with Bishop Biding, or Monsignor Biding over in the mountains. That's part of his call to the priesthood.
I'll be darned. Well, Jim and Dot, with these kind of programs we do, I think our viewers are always interested in your own stories too. And could you speak of how each of you developed such a dedication to Hispanic ministry?
Okay. You want to take the lead on that, or?
Well, I guess, we were Spanish majors in college. That's where we met, and went to school in Mexico. I went one summer, Jim went several summers. And then before we came to Richmond 30 some years ago, we lived in Colombia. Jim was with Exxon, and it was an open pit coal mine. And our boys were like 8 and 9. And it was a wonderful experience for all of us to see a third world country. And we were up in where not much civilization was taking place. And so I was educated, the boys were educated about good people and what they lack, what they really lack, and what we are so blessed with in this country. So when we came here and we started the Hispanic ministry at St. Mark, we reached out to that community, and they are like family to us. And so that we have been there with them on many rough roads and have tried to help, and they have in turn helped us a lot. So,
and the whole issue of immigration resonates particularly with Dot because of her background. Say a little bit about your mom and dad.
Well, my father, both my grandparents, my dad's side was born in the Ukraine, and my mother was Czechoslovakia. And so my mother was not born in Czechoslovakia, but my aunts were. So I know pretty much firsthand immigrant living and the difficulty they had. They were in a coal mining community, and my aunts spoke, some of them not much English. And I know when I would go to Mass with them, and this is pre-Vatican too, the Mass was in Slovak. And I know my cousin had said how we lived in the Pittsburgh area and how they felt so blessed when there was a priest assigned in the Pittsburgh diocese that could understand Slovak so they could go to confession. So it's the language issue, the feeling the stranger in the room. I understand firsthand from my family. So.
And growing up in Pittsburgh, my friends used to kid me. They said, you're really not Bennett. I mean, your name's got to be, you're the only guy in class whose name doesn't end in a vowel. So you sure it wasn't Benetti? Because everybody where we lived, I lived in this little coal mining town. My dad was a coal miner. Everybody was Czech, Slovak, Polish, Italian. Everybody did have a vowel on the end of the name. So.
Well, it's striking too, as I know around the diocese and certainly at places like St. Paul's and Mary Queen, the volume of baptisms is really striking in terms of the number of children from Hispanic families as compared to those who are from, let's say, non-Hispanic families, and it really. The church in the Diocese of Lexington is changing, and how do you see it even developing? Over the next 25 years, with the impact of Hispanic Catholics on our church and our diocese.
Well, you're right, Father Paul. It's changing, and it's changing almost daily. When we moved here 33 years ago. There were some Hispanics, but they came through in the spring to plant tobacco. They were basically migrants, and they would go up north and places like Michigan and pick fruit and things in the summer, and then come back down and strip tobacco and get it to market in the fall, and then go to Florida for produce kinds of things down there in the winter. But if you look at the most recent census done, U.S. got about 330 million people, about 60 million of those 330, just under 20%, are Hispanic. It's the second largest racial group, in the United States today. I saw some numbers recently of the growth in the U.S. population the last 10 years. 52% of it has been in the Hispanic area. When you look down the road, what the Census Department is predicting in 25 years, they said by 2045, Anglos, whites, will be a minority population. It'll be less than 50%. So the Hispanics are they've gone from being migrant to staying. They're not here, 2 or 3 months a year. They're permanent residents. They're buying small pieces of property. We've got Hispanics we work with and know well that we've sort of adopted that have bought little 10-acre plots, and they're literally, living off the land. And they've been just I think a tremendous positive, plus, for the diocese. We've got, I think in round numbers, if every Hispanic within a 25-mile radius of Lexington came to Mass, we would basically double the diocese. There's 45,000 Hispanics within a 30-minute drive of Lexington. And now in the area where we built the center, and we know what the numbers are in terms of how many people attend Mass on a regular basis, most of those folks that live in that area around in the valley were baptized Christians, and most of them were baptized as Catholics, but they don't attend Mass, on a regular basis. So our threefold mission, for the center is to, number one, either bring people to Christ or bring people back to Christ. Number two, close the gap on these social services and areas that we see just what people need to basically survive. And some of the services we're going to provide there are things that, I mean, I have to admit, I've taken for granted, myself. Well, it's not the same for them because of fear, because of the language issue, because of just a variety of things. So the third objective is that we're hoping, and it's happened already, that other people who have been blessed, like Dot and Jim Bennett have been blessed, will pay forward, will give back, whether they want to become involved with this project and volunteer their time, financial support, or whether they want to go out and do their own thing. We had a couple show up yesterday, husband, wife, and a daughter, and recently retired, and she takes old Singer sewing machines and redoes them so that they're working again. And she wants to know if we can somehow have some classes to teach Hispanics how to sew, maybe start their own business, have some workshops where we do those kinds of things. So almost every week someone is calling, emailing, or coming by the center saying, somebody called Doug Culp from a nursing home and said, we'd like to give you guys an organ. So the word's getting out, and I guess what Dot and I've learned the last 12 months since we started construction is that there are a ton of kind people out there that want to be involved, but many of them don't know how to get started. They don't know how to connect. And so if we can take people's gifts, these 30 some volunteers we have so far, and see how their gifts and their talents match up with what these missions are, then I think we'll really be moving.
Would somebody need to be Spanish speaking to be a helpful volunteer, or can you?
No, not at all. We've had people that have come up and volunteered just to help with. One person helped me to organize all the keys in the building, or to have those kinds of skills. And so many of the kids, teenagers and below, speak English perfectly. So if they wanted to be tutors for children that are going to school, or a counselor, a therapist that just speaks English, to talk to maybe a teenager who's suffering from depression, who's is very fluent in English. So no, that's not necessarily the case at all. And again, we need to explain, we are serving that community, and it's not just all Hispanics. It's people, many working, but with low wages and poverty level, who live in that area, who definitely need those services also, and don't have access to them. So that's an important thing to always remember, that it's not just the Hispanic population that we are serving. And of course, we have the Congolese up the street, many from that area.
Yesterday, just in the 48 apartments we visited, of course, a lot of people weren't home, which was good because they're out working. So they've got employment. But we had, of course, mostly Hispanics, but there were families that spoke Swahili, French, a couple Filipino families, and a lady from China, as well as African Americans and Anglos. So it's about that 75-25 ratio that the city councilwoman talked to us about, Jennifer Reynolds. So we're trying to do the communications and flyers and those kinds of things in at least 2 languages now. But we've been pretty adamant about saying, yes, it's the Centro de San Juan Diego. Yes, it's primarily going to be Hispanics, but we're basically there to help out people that are in need, whether they're Hispanic or not.
Do you sense that there's a connection or a sense of unity in that community, cross-cultural, cross countries of origin, or to say, for instance, just for example, the people who speak, who come from Africa stick to themselves, the people who come from Mexico stick to themselves, people who come from Guatemala stick to themselves, or what's happening in terms of, say, a melting pot phenomenon there?
Well, I'm not sure, we haven't been there long enough to really see that, but we are surrounded by businesses, restaurants, grocery store, bakeries, etc. And that's where they all shop. So I'm sure there's intermingling there. And but I think come spring and summer, when we'll hopefully be going full speed with the end of COVID and have our plaza be available to all who walk by, that we'll see that mingling and the assimilation of different groups. So
I think Dot's visual is a good point. Doug Culp noted. He said, it's one of the few places we have in the diocese where you have both. You to the front is commercial, and then right across the street to the back is all residential. So you've got a presence in neighborhoods as well as in the businesses. And I can tell you, some of the people we hired that were just literally walking by the center looking for a job to do general labor kinds of things during construction. You would have an African American working with an Anglo from Jackson County, working with someone from Veracruz, Mexico, working with someone from the Congo. So I think when you come, because we've lived in Europe and South America and went to school in Mexico, when you come initially, I think an Hispanic would tend to identify with his or her own country, and then other Spanish speaking countries. And then the next thing you know, they're all in the pandaria or the tortilla place, all together. So I think the longer they're there, and the common, other than the needs that they have and the geography, the other common characteristic is they're all wanting to learn English. So yeah. I think it's I get a smile on my face when I see a Congolese who's whispering some things in French to someone from Guatemala who's getting some help from somebody in Mexico, all trying to say that this guy wants a toothbrush. And we had those same experiences when we were going into the store. We've never been immigrants per se, but when you don't know the language, which was true when we lived in Europe and initially in South America and Mexico, it's just going to the grocery store can be a chore because you don't know the word for toothbrush or toilet paper, and you don't want to get those two mixed up.
My sense is that teenagers and younger are basically bilingual, and they wind up being sort of like the bridge or the interpreters for their parents, for the adult community. Do you see that developing and almost in a sense where the kids, as the next generation will be more assimilated, or that there'll be a strong need for these particular ministries, like say Hispanic ministry or Congolese ministry? What do you see happening?
It's interesting to me how I'm never anything less than amazed by how quickly kids can learn a language. So when we were with the family that only spoke Swahili, there were 2 adults and then a couple teenage kids who had really a difficult time even saying hello to us. But there were 3 kids under 4, and even probably the 18-month-old could say a few things in English, like hi. So here's this kid who doesn't know what a verb and a noun is and an adjective and pluperfect subjunctive and all that stuff, but he said something like Merry Christmas. The kids just, television, their brothers and sisters. They just pick it up so quickly. They have no fear of making a mistake.
But it is always our hope that they maintain their bilingual abilities, that they, as they grow up and learn English, that they keep their Spanish language and don't lose that at all.
What's it been like, as you can sense, some of the unique challenges that your clientele, if you will, and particularly the Hispanic folks, the Spanish-speaking people are facing in these days of the pandemic with issues of healthcare? What do you see there that's kind of unique and striking?
Well, first of all, yes, they have a higher percentage of COVID cases in their community than they should. I think it's like 4 times the population.
Well, the last couple of months, we've done a little bit better in terms of, we've gone from 4 times the incident rate for infections with Hispanics. Now we're down to 3 times. It's still not good, but at least we're getting better at masking and sanitizing and social distancing. The issues I see with Hispanics, going back to our construction days, is not so much in church and we don't go to retail stores much, but it's on the job site. And so many of these small construction landscaping businesses they work for, the employers, by law have to provide a mask, but there's really not much direction from the top down enforcing that requirement. And where I try to help to some extent is I tell these business owners, look, it's easy to tell somebody what to do, but if you want them to do it voluntarily, you've got to explain why you want them to wear that mask. What does that mask do? Don't make it compliance, regulatory driven. But once you understand the why piece and you educate someone, then you're almost self-motivated, to want to do it. The 3 biggest issues I see us dealing with for the immediate future. One is this fear, and it's you can read books about it, you can read magazine articles, you can watch a little clip on television, but unless you've actually been with the family and somebody's being deported or about to be deported or threatened to be deported, it's impossible to get your head around how deeply rooted that fear is. And some of the fear goes back to language. Quick side story, the guy that was making the furniture for the chapel looked primitive. He had a terrific guy from working for him, won't say his name. And I noticed one day when I went over to the shop, his jaw was swollen. So I was talking to him in Spanish and he said, oh, no, not a big deal, not a big deal. And I went back 2 days later and looked like he had a softball on his cheek. And so the short version is the tooth became abscess. The infection got into his bone and then into his bloodstream, and they were worrying that he was going to go to his brain, he was going to die. And the bottom line was he was convinced that every doctor could, had a phone directly to ICE. And as soon as he walks out of a doctor's office, because his brother had been deported, that he would be deported. So these medical situations that even if you can get access to a physician, we've got to educate people and let people know that the doctor is there to help make you whole, and they don't have a direct line, ICE. And of course, language is part of that problem. If you can't communicate with people, then it's hard to explain, where you're aching, where you're hurting, those kinds of things. And then if they're not afraid, and if they can communicate, or you're with a provider that speaks Spanish, you need an advocate. So, what I see the Hispanic Center doing is help identify issues where people need help. And then we've got to walk with them, literally, to the orthopedic surgeon or the eye doctor or the landlord if there's a rent issue or whatever. It's I would say overcoming fear, learning the language so you can communicate, and then having an advocate. And we see this, I mean, even in our own family. I know when our parents, they're all deceased, but when they were having medical problems and all that, if we didn't drive to their house and take them to the doctor, I mean, our parents, to some extent, were stubborn about going to, what did the doctor say? Oh, I don't know. I didn't want to ask any questions. So that, I think that cuts across, all the demographics.
And to try to help with some of that, this Saturday, we're having a free flu shot day from 12 to 3 with Aldo Gomez from Bluegrass Clinic. And they'll do that, and free blood pressure checks and free glucose checks for diabetics.
3 weeks ago, we had free COVID testing, which we're going to schedule. We had over 100 people show up for that. Week before last, we had a local friend who's a veterinarian who goes to St. Mark. He said, I'll come up. He was up there 6 hours. 2 of his assistants are Hispanic and go to St. Mark's with us. And so he came up and he said, I'll give all the dogs, cats, turtles, snakes, whatever you've got, we'll give them an exam for nothing. And if they need a rabies shot or something, you just pay $12 or whatever it was for the cost of the serum. They had a terrific time. He said, we'll do this. We'll do this every spring and every fall.
And there were 30 animals. And the interesting thing is the rabies shots, these animals were not puppies or kittens. There was only one animal that had been previously vaccinated. So none of the animals had their rabies or the other vaccines that they needed. So that was, he was outside on the plaza and did that. So that was a good day too.
One of the things I'm aware of, just to shift a little bit, in terms of the big picture of Christianity, I think there's a lot of the churches and particularly some of the evangelical churches that have a ministry to brothers and sisters who are Latinos. And how do you see, your ministry, the work of the center intersecting and, being received by and, connecting with and the ministry of other Christian churches that have Hispanic ministries?
Well, I think the willingness and that all want to serve their parishioners, their congregation, and what we can do together to help do that, I think is going to be quite a blessing. And I already have an email of I think it's an Episcopal couple who wish to talk to us and see how maybe we can partner on something. We have a volunteer who's a realtor who Baptist, and he's mentioning about a clinic that his church sponsors or whatever, and how maybe that can be, we can partner with that kind of thing. So I think the health issues are a good way to start that.
We've done a lot of networking, especially the last 6 months. We're hooked in with the chief of police and his staff in a very positive. What can you do through the center to help us reestablish trust? We may have had a good trust relationship 10, 12 years ago. People retire. We have a new generation of law enforcement people. The native Spanish speaking people that go into the police profession tend to, for a variety of reasons, move over to special investigation units, narcotics, that kind of stuff. But we're doing things to keep the kids busy after school till mom and dad come home. Okay, we'll call it youth faith formation. What is prayer? Don't just jump into let's play the rosary. What is prayer? What's the rosary? So we're working with them on those kinds of things. There have been pastors mostly from Baptist churches who have been to some of these meetings with focusing on youth activities and all that. We've been offered financial donations. We've had people that said, we'll come over and help you do things with your people. These are all God's children. I mean, it's really been edifying. And we hooked up with another faith-based community center, on the other end of Lexington. And he said, we started, it's a Protestant group, but will you talk about team players? I said, I have no idea what our utilities are going to be. He said, well, we got 22,000 square feet. You've got 12. So here's my bills from last year. Here's give me your email. Here's our 75-page, employee manual. So you don't have to start from scratch, on those kinds of things. So we've had, I would say most of the people who have volunteered their time, I'd say close to half of them are not Catholic or have anything to do with the Catholic Church.
Wow, that's great.
It's what we've observed is that we're ending up with 2 or 3 or 4 people working on something together that never would run into each other, and I love that.
Yeah.
Here's this Anglo person with this kind of a profession, who's with this person from a different country, and these folks would never bump into each other, and then they're all working for that common good of, help your brothers and sisters in need.
We've got a few minutes left, and I think it's I'm trusting that a lot of our audience has just a basic familiarity with some of the Hispanic customs or the Mexican customs, particularly. Can you speak of how the Feast of Our Lady of Guadalupe, December 12th, how that it's going to be celebrated this year, the pandemic, and maybe also share a few things about some of the devotions, the Christmas devotions and customs that are really just kind of endearing, I think. If you can speak to those a little bit, that'd be great.
Well, for starters, Guadalupe this year is going to be a little more subdued because of the COVID restrictions, but I think our diocese has done a terrific job, not just for Our Lady of Guadalupe, but in all of our services in terms of masking, distancing, sanitizing, etc. The bishop will have a large mass, over at Cordon and Georgetown on Saturday the 12th. And I know here in Richmond and many of the surrounding communities will be having masses at other times. We'll have one here on the eve. And
the Cardone Mass, that'll be on the grounds, right, rather than inside?
And, now, typically what it consists of is you start out somewhere between 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning with mañanitas, where there's music and hot chocolate, and it's a festive event, and it's held early in the morning to start the day off right, and then it's practical because then you go to work, and then you have a variety of things that take place late in the day after that. Sometimes we'll have the Aztec dancers, we'll have the what's called La Obra, we'll have the reenactment of what took place at Guadalupe with people from the local parish. Somebody will dress up like Mary, somebody will be Juan Diego, somebody will be the bishop, and you put this play on, and then you go right into a beautiful mass celebration, and then you have a huge meal afterwards. So we can't do all that this year, but we're going to do everything that's reasonable and prudent for us to do. So we will have a mass with Father Tom and Father Norman came down and helped us out last year, and I'll be deaconing, and we'll probably have 100 people, and then we'll reverse the order and we'll have the mañanitas afterwards, but we will stay in the sanctuary so we make sure we maintain our distancing and do all the right stuff. So this is, in particular, of course, for Mexicans especially, because that's where she appeared, and I think the only time she appeared as La Morena, brown skinned, but other things that occur this time of the year, we just left, November 2nd, Some countries, Dia de Muertos, the Dia de los Difuntos, which is very, very special, and really all of Latin America. I mean, you go to the cemetery with flowers, you take a blanket, you build sometimes a little mini altar, you bring photos.
You have a picnic?
You have a picnic there. You tell stories about your grandmother, grandfather. I mean, it's an amazing event. It really is, just for the Dia de los Muertos. And then somewhat curtailed this year, but then Yvette wrote a nice article on Crossroads, Yvette Culp, about the posadas.
Mhm.
You know, and the word posada in Spanish refers to a place to stay, you know, to an inn. So the posada, you know, commemorates, you know, this journey that Joseph and Mary made from up north in Nazareth, you know, down to Bethlehem. You know, couldn't find a room. You know, in the end, where could Mary be? You know, in a safe place to give birth to Christ. So we're doing some of ours down here in Madison County, Zooming. Typically, you celebrate this for 9 days, starting December 16th up until the 24th. You can start out with something, you know, in a sanctuary with the rosary, and then go from there. Based on where you live, you might be through the local neighborhood, and then families typically will take turns. So you'll be at Father Paul's house one night, Deacon Tim's house the next night, Dot and Jim's house the next night. So they all take turns. Prayer. There's food. I guess most places the emphasis would be on tamales, and then you've got the real origin of the piñata, which is supposed to be symbolic of the 7 deadly sins. And of course, when you beat it with the stick, you know, that's overcoming our sinfulness. And then the sweet things that fall out are symbolic of God's grace. So I think in particular, Dia de Difuntos, and then the Posadas in Guadalupe really adds a lot, you know, to our faith.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. When I was in Moorhead, I was kind of on the outside as a, you know, linguistic kind of guy. But I was so touched by the variety of prayer rituals and customs that the Hispanic community had. Our time has pretty much run its course. This has been awesome. Thank you so much for your ministry, for your love for our brothers and sisters in the community that's being touched by the center, for your leadership, and for the many creative ways, and also for the empowering of the people who you minister to, but also that you invite and stimulate into ministry. So thank you so much. And you know, we've been blessed to have this program today.
Well, thank you. And we would invite anytime anybody wants to come over, just call us, you know, email us. Be happy to take you on the $2 tour. I spent 2 hours with the family yesterday, just showing them things, and it's a fun thing. We never get tired of doing that.
Great. Well, we can certainly be the middle persons for that in terms of people contacting us at the parish and here at Christ the King, and then we can channel them over to you, Jim and Dot. Deacon Tim, you got a little info for next week for us?
Yeah, you just see it up there on the screen next week. You've got Major William Garrett coming to spend some time and talk about the mission of the Salvation Army. And certainly they're very visible this time of year, but they obviously are doing work all year round. And also I know you want to talk to them about how they work with a lot of the organizations here in town, like the Catholic Action Center, the Hope Center, and kind of get how those groups are all working together to help those that are in need, especially now. So that's a look ahead to next Thursday. So,
all righty. Well, thanks. And again, all of you have been watching. You know, might mention to some of your friends that you know, to tune into this. You know, this program. It's able to be pulled up again, and again, it's wonderful the work you're doing, and the way it's kind of mind blowing. And you know, we're projecting 25 years ahead, but if we look back 25 years, you know, who of us gringos would have thunk, you know, that this would be where we're at? And yet This is so important for us as church. So again, thanks for being great leaders and people of inspiration for us, Thought and Jim. God bless you.
Thank you, Father. Thanks, Tim.
All right. Have a great week, everyone.